The rise and fall of the Berlin Wall. An iconic representation of the Cold War, the Berlin Wall marked the clear separation of East and West Berlin for almost 30 years. Built in 1961 as a barrier against the mass exodus of East Germans to West Germany, it symbolized the larger ideological struggle between communism and democracy. In this video, we will explore the key events surrounding the Berlin Wall and 7 significant points. Number 7. Post-World War II division. Germany was in complete disarray following the Second World War, both politically and physically. The United States, the United Kingdom, France, and the Soviet Union were in charge of the 4 occupation zones that the Allies created after realizing that a coordinated strategy was required for rebuilding Germany. At first, this division was meant to be a short-term solution to help with demilitarization and reconstruction. But these zones became more and more distinct as hostilities between the Soviet Union and the Western Allies grew over matters like political ideology and reparations. The Federal Republic of Germany, West Germany, which embraced a democratic government and a market-oriented economy, was created in 1949 when the Western Allies combined their zones. The German Democratic Republic East Germany, on the other hand, emerged from the Soviet zone and was typified by a one-party communist government that repressed opposition and ruled over all facets of society. Berlin, which was separated into East Berlin and West Berlin, was a rare example of a city divided between 2 opposing ideologies. Berlin was located deep within East Germany. This split prepared the way for other battles that would come to define the Cold War era, as well as for important political and social divides. Number 6. Construction of the Wall. An important turning point in the history of the Cold War was the erection of the Berlin Wall on August 13, 1961, which symbolized the frantic efforts of East German authorities to stop the flow of immigrants into West Berlin. At this point, talented laborers and professionals were leaving East Germany for the West in quest of better possibilities, which was making the country's economic problems worse. The East German administration faced political embarrassment as well as a serious threat to its economic stability as a result of the mass migration. Leaders in East Germany responded by deciding to build a physical barrier to stop more defections. It began as an overnight barbed wire fence and soon developed into an intricate network of defenses that included 12-foot-tall concrete walls, guard towers outfitted with machine guns and searchlights, and a closely guarded death strip rimmed with obstacles meant to impede escape attempts. Berlin was separated psychologically as well as physically when the wall was built. For those living in East Germany, it symbolized oppression, while for those living in West Berlin, it stood for freedom. The ideological struggle between capitalism and communism that characterized this era was brought to light by the striking differences between lives on either side. Number 5. Symbol of Cold War division. One of the most powerful representations of the Cold War, the Berlin Wall was a physical representation of the conflict between communism and democracy that shaped world politics from 1947 until the early 1990s. It was a sobering reminder of just how severely divided Europe had become after the Second World War, with Western Europe united with capitalist democracies led by the United States and Eastern Europe, mostly under Soviet influence. In addition to dividing family and friends, the wall symbolized larger geopolitical conflicts. In the Eastern Bloc countries, where its inhabitants had to deal with censorship, restricted liberties, and official surveillance, the wall came to be associated with repression. Many in the West, particularly in the United States and Western Europe, saw the wall as an epitome of communist failure and a symbol of oppression and tyranny. In stark contrast, democratic principles like free speech and economic prosperity were exhibited by West Berlin, which flourished as an oasis of freedom in the midst of an ocean of dictatorship. Both sides utilized propaganda to further their own positions, with Western media portraying East Germany as a prison state and Eastern Bloc officials using the wall as justification for their oppressive policies in order to defend their way of life from what they saw as Western encroachment. Number 4. Human cost. One of the most terrible after effects of the Berlin Wall is the human cost. More than 130 people died trying to pass from East to West Berlin throughout its nearly 3-decade existence, as many of them were shot by border guards or perished in mishaps while making hasty attempts to flee. The border was brutally guarded by the East German authorities, and anyone found attempting to flee was subject to harsh penalties, such as jail or execution. Tales of individual bravery and communal suffering arose from this dark period of history. Families split apart by an arbitrary border on a map, youths risking all in the hopes of escaping, desperate attempts using improvised hot air balloons or intricate tunnels dug beneath the wall that frequently ended tragically. These stories highlight the terrible realities experienced by those living under oppressive regimes while also serving as moving reminders of how resilient people can be in the face of injustice. Today, memorials like a memorial to the victims of the Berlin Wall serve as somber homage to those who gave their lives in the name of freedom, honoring their bravery and selflessness. Number 3. Growing dissent. The population of East Germany became increasingly dissatisfied with political repression, economic stagnation, and limited personal liberties by the late 1980s, when displeasure with life there reached a critical mass. The incapacity of the government to supply basic necessities like food, shelter, and jobs led to public indignation against an authoritarian rule that appeared disconnected from the demands of its people. Inspired by reform movements in nearby nations such as Poland, where solidarity had effectively contested communist governance, East Germans initiated nonviolent demonstrations calling for reform. Thousands of people came together every week to demand more freedoms and changes during the start of the Leipzig Monday demonstrations in September 1989. As people from all areas of life banded together in opposition to oppressive government policies, the meetings got larger over time. In addition to highlighting a desire for change within East Germany, the protests also represented broader changes taking place in Eastern Europe as people grew more and more opposed to authoritarian authority and in favor of democracy and human rights. Reform movements gained momentum, and it was evident that many East Germans were prepared to lose everything in order to have their voices heard. This willingness to take a stand would eventually lead to significant reforms. Number 2. Fall of the Wall. The occurrence of the fall of the Berlin Wall on November 9, 1989 was not an isolated incident. Rather, it marked the end of years of resistance against tyranny and was a historic event that had global implications. After years of stringent border control measures maintained by East German officials, many were taken aback by the revelation that East Germans might enter West Berlin without restriction due to a misunderstanding that occurred during a press conference. After decades behind the wall of an oppressive dictatorship, the streets were packed with joyous throngs anxious to taste freedom or just reunite with family members, as word quickly circulated through numerous routes, including word of mouth. Overworked border guards were unable to handle this enormous influx. Some gave in to demonstrators' demands to enter West Berlin by opening gates. In addition to putting an end to physical segregation, this spontaneous deed launched a new age in Europe, one that was full of hope for freedom and unification, a time when people celebrated their common humanity rather than their differences. It became evident that this event would signify more than simply German reunification. It marked a wider victory over oppression throughout Eastern Europe when portions of the wall were pulled down amid cheers and celebrations. Number 1. Aftermath and reunification. Following the fall of the wall, revolutionary events took place that eventually resulted in the reunification of Germany on October 3, 1990. This historic event was widely welcomed as a victory against oppression and separation on a national and international level. In addition to signifying the end of physical segregation within Germany, the removal of barriers was a reflection of larger changes taking place throughout Eastern Europe. In the months that followed this momentous occasion, nations such as Czechoslovakia and Hungary underwent profound political changes as well, which are commonly referred to as the revolutions of 1989. In order to integrate two very different economies, one marked by socialist stagnation and the other by capitalist prosperity, leaders from both sides had to carefully plan and negotiate in order to address economic disparities and promote social cohesion among citizens who had lived under different systems for decades. Reunification presented both opportunities and challenges for Germany. The reunified nation faced lingering issues like economic disparity between former East and West Germans, along with cultural differences stemming from decades spent apart. These challenges underscored how deeply ingrained divisions can persist even after physical barriers have been removed, even though many celebrated this newfound unity as a victory for democracy. Ultimately, though, the fall of the Berlin Wall continues to serve as a potent symbol of hope and a reminder of what is possible when people band together to fight injustice and pursue freedom and justice. As a potent reminder of the fight for freedom and unity against oppression, the remains of the Berlin Wall still stand today. Thanks for watching our video, and don't forget to subscribe.